Recording. All right, guys, this is going to be a real short session. We're just going to cover, log settings, where you can configure some stuff. I know we looked at it before, but, good review didn't hurt nobody. So what we have in our topology, simple, Soho network, right? We have a LAN, of course, firewall in the middle of it, right at the edge, that handles, of course, packet inspection and what have you, using the UTMs and checking everything, okay? All that fun stuff, right? But like we spoke about yesterday, what happens when we need to go ahead and investigate, look at logs, see how the traffic looks, right? So to go ahead and start, I'm going to go ahead and generate some traffic, right? All right, so I'm going to just ping Google, right? And we are going, right? We see that traffic. I'm also going to make sure I enabled this. We will come back to that in a moment, right? But like we spoke about in the theory session last night, right? To look at logs, right? To start investigating them, you have to go to the left navigation bar of the Fortigate, right? Go to log and report, right? And first you will see three different sections. You have your forward traffic, right? Forward traffic being traffic that is passing through, right, your FortiGate, okay? You also have your local traffic. This is traffic that is originating from the FortiGate, right? So this would be, management traffic or what have you. Maybe you're sending stuff, getting stuff for NTP server, right? Maybe you're going ahead and shooting, shooting messages up to an NMS, right, to a network management system. All of that would be here, right? So that would be in your local traffic. Sniffer traffic, of course, if you would set up one of the interfaces to be a sniffer, right, to go ahead and capture packets while it's traversing through a port, you would go ahead and see that traffic right here, okay? All right. We also have our event logs, right? Just like I told you guys, there are logs for specific events for functions and modules that are on the firewall, right? We have system events, we have SD-WAN events, we have high availability events, right? We have SDN connector events, right? And of course, SDN connector meaning in regards to your fabric, okay? So you'll see all of that, right? Router events, user events, and so on, right? You have all of these event logs you can go ahead and check, okay? Last but not least, in this section, I'm sure you can see it's segmented, right? Right? We have different things, right, that are related to our, UTMs, right? We have our antivirus, we have our web filter, right? We have our application control, we have our intrusion prevention, right? We also have SSL, right? We also have DNS query, what have you, to check all these things. We also have an anomaly section, right? All of these things have in common is security in some way, shape, or form, right? So this is your security section, okay? So just like Don asked last night, right? Where would you take a look at, right? Where would you go research to find packets that were captured, right, by a UTM, right? That triggered a signature, triggered our alarm, and the UTM profile said, hey, this is a signature that's matching this current threat that's logged in our database, right? That we send to all our FortiGates that have a subscription to FortiGuard. It'll be installed, of course, right? Those recent signatures will be installed and shared on your FortiGate if you have an active license, right, and a support contract. But then it would also, right, if it passes through the FortiGate, all those captures will be shown right here in one of these logs. So if it was found, maybe it was triggered by antivirus, you'll see that log here. If it was triggered by application control and so on, you'll see it in those respective sections, okay? All right, so we went over that, right? We did a quick review of that. Now let's go ahead and talk about log settings, right? So we talked about, right, where you can go ahead and change some of your log settings, right? You can change it, of course, in the GUI, but you can also change a little bit more stuff, be a little bit more granular in the CLI, right? But GUI, straight out of the box, you can go ahead and get things rolling, right? So you can do a lot of things here, right? By default, we see the default settings. We see local log, right? It's saving those logs to the disk, to the hard disk that's actually on the FortiGate, right? We went ahead by default. We have local reports are enabled, and we have historical FortiView that's enabled. Okay. We of course see the disk usage as well, and why Fortinet put this here, right? So that any admin, anybody that's network security engineer that's managing this, they can go ahead and see how the logs are affecting its memory, right? The memory that's on the FortiGate, because it has a dedicated section just for logs on the FortiGate. Okay. You get this little pop-up message, right? Logs older than 7 days are deleted from the disk. Okay. All right. So without you configuring anything, this is the default setting, right? So that's why, of course, Fortinet recommends you go ahead and get a external, maybe a syslog server or a SIEM, right, server, or you can get FortiAnalyzer, FortiManagers, right, to act as your remote logging server. Okay. Right. Of course, you'll have this historical disk usage graph, right? And of course, what we saw yesterday, right? We can still leave it to, of course, local logging being at the disk, but we can also at the same time enable remote logging just for redundancy, right? We can say, hey, send logs to FortiManager and FortiAnalyzer. Or we can say, hey, send logs to maybe our Splunk server. We can go ahead and enable that here. We would just go ahead and enter it by either FQDN, right, fully qualified domain name, or the IP address. Okay. We also have the option to go ahead and send logs to the cloud, right? As long as we have a FortiCloud account, right? Active license or what have you, we activate that, we can actually have our logs be sent there. We can view our logs from anywhere around the world. We don't have to be, log into a VPN or what have you, an SSL VPN, and get into our network, get onto the box, and so on. Okay. All right. You do also have the option, right? The upload option. I think I told you guys yesterday, right? By default, and this is also with FortiAnalyzer, FortiManager as well, it'll go ahead and upload the logs every 300 seconds, right? Every 5 minutes, right? But you can go ahead and make those changes. You can say every minute in real time. But, Mike Kiva, what I asked you guys yesterday is that with these settings that you're changing in regards to logs, right? It's going to have an effect, right? It's going to have an effect on hardware performance, right? Because remember that NPU, right, is responsible for processing those packets at an enormous rate, right? So many packets passing through the firewall, right? It's doing packet processing along with cross-checking with your UTM profiles that you have enabled on each firewall policy, right? So enabling a lot of log settings, okay, it can actually have performance issues on the actual hardware of the FortiGate, okay? So you have to plan, you have to architecture what you want your environment and your topology to do, okay, or your fabric to do. Okay, but this is one setting, right? You have your cloud logging setting. So you have different options to go ahead and send logs wherever you want to be. It doesn't just have to be on the disk. Okay, let's go ahead and keep going, right? So we spoke about this yesterday, right? We spoke about UUIDs, right? Right, and I'll go ahead and hover over here. Enabling any of the following will allow the UUID of the objects to be stored in the traffic logs, okay? So if there's an address object, right, for maybe a subnet, right, that's passing through, you can go ahead and enable it, right? And it won't have the IP address. It will show the actual address object that you configured on the firewall in those traffic logs, okay? So you can go ahead and enable that here, all right? Okay. Last but not least, we have our log settings, right? And so here is where we can go ahead and customize anything, right? By default, out of the box, event logging, all of it is on, right? Maybe Twan wanted to go ahead and customize, says maybe we don't need everything. Maybe we're not using the FortiGate as a Wi-Fi controller, okay? Maybe we don't have HA, right? We don't have HA enabled, right? And maybe we're not doing SD-WAN. You can turn a lot of these things off, save resources, right? So it can be used for other things within the device, okay? You also can go ahead and customize your local traffic log, right? So traffic that's sourcing from your FortiGate, not passing through. Okay. You can go ahead and customize that, right? Right out of the box, all this is unchecked. You can go ahead and pick all, or, right? How I like to go ahead and tell folks, you, of course, architecture what you want to capture. Okay. All right. So GUI preferences, right? And Fortinet made sure they specify this, right? Within your logs, right? You can either, if you're seeing the source and destination IP address, more so the destination, right? Um, it has the option to go ahead and resolve host names for you, right? So maybe it's going through, it says 8.8.8.8, right? If this option is checked, it will show google.com. Okay. So it can go ahead and resolve it for you instead of you doing a reverse DNS lookup and seeing, okay, who's 8.8.4.4. Let me go ahead and go on Google and let me go ahead and use an online tool and see who is this, what is this, right? It also has the option to go ahead and resolve unknown applications, right? By using its best known um, using its ports and using its best known resolvers on FortiGuard. So you also have the option as well. And all of this, right, is to enable you as the network security engineer to investigate if anything happens, any security threats, any threats that you need to, any traffic that you need to investigate. This is all to help you. So you want to know everything all options that you have to help you and your team in the future to mitigate threats, to handle threats, and to be an effective network security engineer. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to threat weight. Threat weight. Okay, so key thing I want to go ahead and say here: threat weight will not impact how traffic is passed through the FortiGate. It will not impact severity levels within UTM profiles. This is strictly just for logs. Okay. All right. So we can go ahead and disable, right? Log threat weight, or we can go ahead and enable it, right? You do have that option. You can turn it off and turn it on, right? And as you can see, we have plenty of options that look familiar to some of our UTMs, right? So we have application protection, right? We, right, being the engineers, we can go ahead and tell it, hey, maybe P2P, make that critical, right? By default, FortiGate says that is low, has a threat weight of being low. So we're not paying a lot of attention to it as far as within the logs. Okay. So you can go ahead and manipulate right? Any of these settings to say what's critical or high or low or medium for you. Okay. So my advice, right, is to always take a look at this, read, see what is available for your environment. As in regards to the NSE4 exam, you do not have to remember each and every threat weight that's available to you. You just need to know what threat weight is, right, and how you can go ahead and manipulate the risk levels, right? Okay. And as we saw yesterday, of course, you can go ahead and set numeric values for the risk level values. You can set 5, right? By default, out of the box, 5 is low, 10 is medium, right? 30 is high, and 50 is critical, right? And all these things, again, I would take specific time to go ahead and take a look at it, right? And a lot of you guys being, security engineers or what have you already, you guys should know that this is not a industry-wide um, industry industry-wide weight measure, right? Because Fortinet's, for example, Fortinet's malicious websites, right, may be listed as high, right? But this is from their own directory, right? Maybe you guys are looking at code 42 or some of the other, malware security sources that may have updated information more than Fortinet. So you just want to be active here and know what you're looking for and say, and take control of security within your own environment and say, hey, I'm going to make everything high, make everything critical. I'm going to take everything serious because security is an important thing in the field right now, right? In regards to all vectors being open at this point. Okay. So that is threat weight and that is log settings. Any questions?
No, none for me.
Okay. Tuan, what about you?
No questions right now.
Okay. All right, guys. I'll go ahead and end it here, and I will see you guys next week.
Alrighty, thanks, David. Have a
All right,
good night,
guys.
guys.
Later.
Thanks, Dave. Later.